Hi, my name's Dee, your professor of woo-woo, and welcome to Sunchild Tarot, and welcome to our, bi-weekly look at the lunation for the new moon in Libra. Hello, David. How are you doing?
Hey, Dee, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, before we dive into this new moon, there was a comment on one of the astrologers' videos that I watch where they were doing a monthly forecast, which is totally understandable, and they mentioned that what's really the point of new moon and full moon deep dives, because they happen to every 2 weeks. You know, they're not that special. What's your feelings about that? Because there is, although I can see sort of where they're coming from, I was like,
Yeah, I mean, astrology is about you looking at the skies and you having important time markers that will serve as reference points for what's going on in the present. And the most, they are common, they happen every 2 weeks, the lunations, but they are the parts of the cycle between the sun and the moon that can be taken as a snapshot of what's going on in the present. That's more likely to give you a clear picture of everything, because the events that happen around a full moon and a new moon, they are very determining of what that cycle is going to look like or looks like in general. And that's why it has value to look at, even if it happens most of the time, all the time.
But the same can be said for any two bodies and their particular cycle. If we were saying, for example, Venus, Saturn, just pulling it out of the air, where their conjunction occurs and the condition of their conjunction is said to add a nature to the rest of their aspects and communications to each other until they get back to that conjunction point. Is that not true?
Yes, that's true. But you're looking at specific energies like Venusian topics in relation to Saturnian topics. When you're talking about the lunations, you're talking about the consciousness in general in relation to the whole picture of the chart. So you're talking about not only the sun and the moon, but you're talking about their relationship with the other planets as well. And thus you're describing more broadly the situation that you're looking at, not only through those particular planets' essence, you know.
Well, I think looking at the cycles, specifically with this new moon, I think you'll know where I'm going with this, is particularly relevant. So why don't you take center stage, pop the chart up, and then you know where the first thing that we're going to look at on this is. So tell us about this new moon. Anything special happening about this new moon, David?
Well, this is the chart, as you can see. And the first thing that pops into my vision is that you have Mars exactly conjunct to that new moon. And both the sun and Mars in this configuration are debilitated, as we say in traditional astrology. The sun, because it's in its full sign, meaning that it doesn't have the oomph, the impulse necessary to uphold its significations. It tries to rise up, but it keeps getting its image brought down in figurative terms. You have Mars as well in its detriment, which means being as far away from home as possible. And whereas the fall of the sun has some promise of being able to come back up in the future, because it's just like a depression in the road, Mars, being in debility, has to learn to function and to exist in a place that is not for it. In fact, it's inimical to it. The sun can by being in full, can do that a little better than Mars could. But both of them are debilitated and cannot bring their hot and dry natures as successfully to the upfront as they would in other air signs, or in Gemini, for instance, because it's also exiled in Aquarius.
If we're looking at the things in detriment and what have you, Venus, which is the ruler of this event, ain't doing so well either.
Yeah, it's also in detriment. So not only we have a malefic with this configuration being very, prominently present, because it's Cazimi also. So it's the new beginning of the Mars cycle, as we are going to speak a little bit more about in a second. Venus is also being debilitated brings us this certainty that whatever images come out of this are going to be bad. And I don't mean bad in the sense that you're not going to overcome it, because that will depend on your personal chart and your personal disposition of planets and how they're configured to each other. But in this case, we are going to be faced with things that we lack. Even if it, for me, for example, it's not been bad. I have had very bad circumstances happening to people around me in this Venusian period, and these people have important Venus significations in their charts and such. But to me, it hasn't been that bad. However, the images that have come up to me have evidentiated how my desires have misled me prior to now. So even if it's not something that will affect your routine or your functioning of your daily life in a huge way, do look for those dissatisfying things, for those frustrations, for those incompletions in your endeavors that you are frustrated about, that you don't like, and that you're trying to change or trying to take in a new direction. Those things are going to be what's most prominent in our consciousness right now because of the debility of these planets.
So what you're saying by bad is not that these images and experiences that you're drawing in personal interpretations from your own experiences, it's not that they're bad as in they're not telling the truth, they're not portraying what's going on around you accurately. You're saying that they are telling the truth, and what they're portraying is basically a bit pants.
Yes, they actually might be lying, because the images, they are the opposite of what they would promise to be when the planet Mars and Venus in this case is an ability. You have the opposite of what you intended to do with that thing, unless you purposefully try to do a creative endeavor that would show the opposition. So as Austin Coppock said in the last forecast of the Astrology podcast, for instance, doing Venusian things in a Mars way, doing art, for instance, as a protest, as a form of protest. So that dress in the Met Gala from that woman, I forgot her name, who has a Libra stellium that they also mentioned. She had a white dress.
The AOC dress.
Yes, she had a white dress with red painting on it, and white is already a Venusian color as well, as associated with Venus. In red, obviously, is Mars, and it was written "tax the rich." So it is a form of protest. It's an arty form of protest. In other words,
can we get anything good?
Yes.
Can we get anything
good that we get out of it? The good that we get out of it is the consciousness around the things that we have been doing. So Venus is the stability. Venus is justice, social justice, talking to another to get to a consensus. And that's being denied right now because Venus is in detriment. Not only that, but you have also those planets that are not comfortable in Libra, including Mercury, who's retrograde, so also in debility at that moment, even though it doesn't have any particular animosity towards Libra. You have that Venus showing you the bad things, the frustrations around the things that you have been putting your energy on, trying to get a result out of, and you haven't been able to. Right now, you're going to become acutely aware of the things that have been impeding you from getting to what you want, because Venus is desires. Venus is what moves you to be more like that vision that you have. It's something that sings to you like a siren and attracts you into its realm. So if that is attracting you to look at things that are contrary to its own nature, which is beauty, harmony, and things like that, then it's going to show you the disharmony, the lack of beauty and things that you have been driving your focus towards. And it's going to be very uncomfortable because Mars is also in Libra, making every Libran attempt that you make to make a consensus, to get a consensus out of a determined group, it's going to fail. And that's because you should see the failure. That's what you should focus on right now in order to fix it.
Right. I want to go on to a minute. One thing that you definitely said about the debate being denied. that you said earlier at the start of that. But what you were saying about the Siren song, the degree head of 13 degrees Libra, the Franz Barden's degree head, is an entity called Rakita. And this is his description. Rakita is a master of singing. There's, if the magician wishes it, he will equip him with a lovely voice, which will fascinate people. Therefore, this head may justly be called the protector of all male and female singers. So matter whether their singing is their profession or their special hobby when in company. Rakita shows the ways and means how to cultivate one's voice. Now, that's really interesting as well in the terms of wanting to, where you say, where we can see debate has been denied, because we've just had that Facebook and YouTube. Don't get me wrong, I am not an anti-vaxxer, but I am pro-vaccine. So there's half my viewers disappeared. But to actually shut the debate down is ridiculous. Admit it. The problem is not people saying stupid things. The problem is the algorithm, so that people get driven into echo chambers rather than being confronted with an opposing point of view, with people who says, yes, but what about this fact? What about this research? What about this? What about that? And being able to have those points of views actually clash. So yes, Mars in its, did you say fall or detriment?
Detriment.
Detriment. Mars in its detriment, that combat between the opposing point of views has even been denied. Never mind debate, you know, the intellectual combat that is there has been denied.
Interesting you say intellectual debate. Air signs are all about ideas. Air signs are all about the multiplicity that those ideals bring to society. So in order to have a functioning society, you have to have politics allowing people to have healthy debates about these issues. But we're not getting that, as we were saying, because Mars is in Libra and Venus is in Scorpio. Now, the thing I want to say about this new moon is much like the other one, the other lunation that we were talking about, that we had a lot of promise with this new moon, and the full moon would have these planets moving into their detriment, and we would see that the options that we had were not so multiple, but they served a purpose to motivate us to move forward. Now we have the motivation, we know what's the path that's available to us, but we also see the impact, the actual impacts that that's going to have in our general lifestyle and everything. And we start getting afraid. There's not much Earth in this chart, but there will be Venus in a fire sign when she moves into Sagittarius, and we will have Saturn and Jupiter moving direct, and also Mercury eventually in 12 days or so after the new moon. And the problem here is that Mars is still going to be in detriment. The sun is still going to be in fall for at least 2 more weeks. So while Venus is leaving its detriment, but those two aren't, we are going to experience this sudden rush of impulse to do what we desire, to apply that new ideal of the Jupiter stationing direct upon that new structure that has been given to us with Saturn stationing direct with this new moon, because Saturn is in phases here. Saturn is screaming in the sky right now. It's at a very bright point in this cycle, stationing direct, telling us that everything that we've been living since the beginning of the year, since Saturn started these squares to Uranus, that's going to complete now that's moving direct. It's going to make one final square to Uranus by, I think, late November or December, which is within the eclipse cycle as well, within the eclipses period. We are going to have these changes settling or being made effectively by the end of the year when the eclipses take place, but the ideals are set now. the figure of what we are going to accomplish, of what we want to go towards, is set now. And we are risking having this rush of blood to the head that's going to make us act on impulse and try to do things faster than we should, because Mars is in the superior position here. So we have to be very grounded. We have to be very stable in our pace. We have to always remember to be earthy in our movement. Otherwise, we're just going to be taken by the fire of Venus, and Jupiter here in an air sign being propelled by this air that Jupiter is giving Venus in the sextile. We are going to see our desires ruling everything and taking us to a path that we don't necessarily like, because Mars is going to be burning through whatever Venus gives him. You know, it's going to be like, I want this and I want this now. If you don't agree with me, you're not worth the company, you know? You're not worth keeping in my life right now. So we might be very extreme in our relationships. Again, for some people that might be good. They might be finding themselves in a situation where they are too earthy and they need that oomph. They need that propelling influence in order to achieve something, to actually put their rituals into practice, not only idealize how the structure should follow. So that's probably good for earth signs such as Virgo ascendants, for instance, or Taurus ascendant. Any earth ascendant really is going to experience this push, you know, towards action that they don't generally like to have impressed upon them. But right now it's a very motivational time, very good time to act, as long as you have the grounded
That's a really interesting point, because what you've been saying so far, I'm not hearing a great deal about seeking the balance that Libra promises.
No, this is not balanced. This is not balanced. It's a desperation, because you have the debilitated planets there. So it's a desperation for balance that leads you to imbalance, really. And Venus with Jupiter on Venus is considered to be good. This is something that I've been listening to some of Robert Schmidt's materials that are available in his website. And he speaks on his work about some passages in the sources that speak about how Venus on Jupiter, which is Venus and Sagittarius in this case comparing, is not so good, because it makes for unrealistic expectations and ideals that you try to achieve at any cost, but that might not have the necessary ground to be worked on. And might lead you to ruin, might lead you, the siren that leads you to the deep of the river or the lake or anything like that, or the ocean.
Yeah. Right. So I've got so much.
And that has to do also with the south node. I like that image, sorry, of the siren trying to draw
you towards the rocks. Yeah. So what you were saying there about Saturn screaming in the sky, last night on Spencer's live stream, my memory is not good enough to remember which older astrologer he was quoting, but when the ruler of an important conjunction is in its detriment, you have a look round to see who is in exaltation, which of course is Saturn.
Mm-hmm. Well, Saturn is in domicile.
Now, what is interesting is that Saturn is being ruled by the goetic spirit Malthus. The new moon and Mars is in the Decan, 5-degree arc, ruled by the goetic spirit Malthus. Malthus, whose planet is Saturn. And there's a really interesting thing about Malthus will deceive those who make sacrifice to him. Comes in the form of a crow. I'm sure it was this lunation where people have been talking about an association with a star that's in Corvus. Malthus first appears in the form of a crow, will take on a human form at the request of the magician. He builds houses and high towers. That high towers thing, that constructing these are my beliefs right now, and I will make my tower here, and I will not only just choose the hill I'm going to die on, I will build the hill I am going to die on.
Yeah, it feels like that tower card but not in the normal tarot, but in the Lenormand deck, that you have the tower card signifying these institutions or institutionalized things, or these high ideals that are set in stone in your life, basically. So yeah, this is the new formulation of those. And I want to speak about the square between Saturn and Uranus in this, because it's what we've been dealing with throughout the year. And this particular aspect is coming to its final moments now, where we're going to have the last square and Jupiter stationing direct, helping Saturn to, because they're both from the triplicity of air as well, Jupiter and Saturn. And then you have Mercury also in an air sign. So ideals right now, forming of ideas, coming to new consensus, all of that is very helpful. All of that, sitting down to try and make multiple inferences, is that correct? I'm not sure if that's the correct word, about what's going on around you. Really sitting down and not allowing the circumstances to just guide you anymore, because you're seeing that the circumstances are not as they once were. It might take people a long time to realize, because of the depth of the circus that was placed around us, so we wouldn't see the structure working underneath it or behind it or behind the curtains. But now the curtains have fallen, and now the circus is on fire, and people are still thinking it's a part of the spectacle that they came to watch. They didn't realize they should have been running all along, you know? And that's the place where we find ourselves in now. The circus have been on fire all along, and we notice that we are still listening to the guy in the middle, you know, of the stage, telling us that everything is fine, that we are still in the middle of a show, but we feel that our lives are in danger and that we should move elsewhere, to a new circus, to a new stage, to a new form of routine or ideal. Let's put it like that. And right now, we are being led by that impulse, by that feeling of, I need to reach that. And Venus is going to retrograde in Capricorn conjoined to Pluto later on. So we are going to have the results of whatever actions we take right now very clear until Christmas. And she's going to be holding hands with Mars all the way for a long time. So, and when she turns direct.
Well, it's interesting from the image you were saying about the big top being on fire and the debate being suppressed. People, the one good thing about Malthus, he may deceive you if you make sacrifice to him, but he can reveal an enemy's thoughts and reveal, again, is that the deception coming in, or is that the, oh my God, they're thinking this sort of thing, which only inflames that sense of confrontation?
Well, Saturn is a malefic planet, and it is about ignorance, or the things you neglect or ignore or sweep under the rug and things like that. So it doesn't surprise me that a spirit that is associated with Saturn deceives you if you try to focus on it too much, because Saturn will do that also. If you try to be Saturnian all the time, you'll find yourself depressed, or you'll find yourself sucking the energy of every environment that you go to, and people not wanting to be around you, because all the time you suck all the happiness and notice all the things that other people are not noticing that are harmful to the environment, because that's what Saturn does. So to remediate that, it's not necessary to be focusing on Saturn as the spotlight, you know, shining the spotlight on it all the time. You have to do the work constantly to tie your loose ends, basically. You don't have to focus on them, but just make sure you're doing the extra work, inputting the extra energy to be sure that nothing is going wrong, that you have a functioning structure going around, that it doesn't have any loopholes or loose ends that you might fall off from.
This is very much a developmental period, isn't it? People they're honing their arguments in secret because debate is being stomped upon. Mm-hmm. But it is a process of trying to develop how we are going to move forward. If we look
Saturn
at
is separation, yeah.
If we look at the angelic arc that this new moon is in, this is ruled by the angel Rehael. Let's see if the screen will see it. And now the angel Rehael is about diamond in the rough, i.e. something that has to be worked on, that there is a gift there. And interestingly, the other phrase associated with it is filial submission. About being able, I would like to interpret this in the terms of finding a way to, I don't want to say submission or compromise, but finding the way to allow your brother to have what your brother is wanting, which is one thing that some of the astrologers have been picking up, as like Rick Levine has been saying, if there is a winner, everybody loses.
Yeah, I love that.
But we have, by degree, Daniel. Let's see if you can see that one. And Daniel's quotes are eloquent. So there's going to be some really good arguments when they finally get unleashed. You know, people will hopefully be able to state their position, whether flawed or not, because bear in mind, they're building these towers and they're building their own hills they're going to die on. And they haven't been confronted with opposing arguments, but they are still being able to compose their argument. But there's also the phrase associated with Daniel, enough is never enough. So all at once, there's this driving force to go, this is my point, this is my point, you should all agree with me, and I need more and more and more agreement. Whereas Rahael's like going, well, slow down a minute. There's no reason that everybody can't have some cake. You know, just to go back to my old cake analogy, you know, all astrology boils down to cake. And
in this case, I think it's important to say that because we are not in a period of peace. If you look at the last air age, which happened around 1226, I think it was the first year of it last time,
yeah.
And it went up until almost the 1400s. When you had the last period, you only had division. It was the beginning of capitalism as we know today. It was there that it started developing into this form that we see in the cities, to later on the industry and all of that. It started back then. And it was caused by a lot of political division. It was also a big factor that happened then was the big chasm. I'm not sure how the word goes in English, but it's that break the church had that created two popes. Yeah, the church and state started separating at that time, and it was very it shook society in a very fundamental way, and that's what we are seeing now with this new air age that started back in the early 80s, and it's now fully, you know, ingressed into our lives, fully integrated into our awareness. Everyone that was born since the early 80s has this mentality of the new world or the new world order, if you know what I mean. And I'm not talking about anything specific or any particular belief system. I'm not only saying new world order because this is what happens to society when these planets do that.
No tinfoil on that one.
Yeah, and now specifically 2021, with these configurations in this new moon, we are seeing the events that are going to develop into the next decade's conflicts. We are going to see things rising up right now that are going to give a way to factions and to different countries, different delimitations of political borders of countries and new economic blocks and all of those things that are going to reshape society as we know it long after you and I, Darren, are gone. This is what's happening right now. So it feels very confusing and it feels very destabilizing. But for the people of the new generation that grew up listening about this destabilization that was growing, we are in the momentum to probably just reaffirm our own belief systems that we arose with according to the development of technology and to the ways that we have developed social contact within that new environment that our generation is in. So it's all changing very rapidly. In a personal sense, this will mean that We will need to make concessions, as you were saying, respect your compromise with your siblings, with your brother. Saturn and Mars both represent older and younger siblings, respectively. And they and we are talking about here doing the Saturnian thing, because Saturn is the only one here who has the upper hand by being in its own domicile. A lot of the other planets are responding to other energies, to other planets. So being Saturnian can be more compensating for people here. If you have a very difficult relationship with Saturn, then I advise you to be extra careful. I advise you to be extra conscious. To try and make yourself more disciplined, you have to put in the work and the effort to be more disciplined. If you are not being disciplined, if you're not being Saturnian, things are going to fall apart for you, and you are going to experience that debility of the other planets as a dragging, as a grabbing and dragging of the planets, and you're going to go kicking and screaming possibly.
But there's a danger in that as well. I mean, absolutely follow your advice, but be very, very, very aware that Saturn semi-square Neptune brings chaos and confusion, blocks imagination and deduction, amplifies backwards opinions and beliefs, and can give someone a great sense of spiritual passion, i.e. fanaticism. You know, so where people are encouraged to achieve their goals by all possible means. So yes to everything that you said, but still sticking, hopefully, with that spirit of Libra, which the poor thing's barely got a look in so far, of like trying to find that balance or trying to find that win-win. Because it strikes me that, especially with that deception of Malthus with that Saturn, things could so easily go wrong right now.
That's why being Saturnian is the best choice you can make. And I also speak to the affinity that Neptune might have to Pisces, in the sense that being both of them well dignified, if you can call Neptune well dignified in Pisces, it means that even if there is confusion, you can consciously access how that confusion plays a part in your life. And there is an availability of ideals or of spirits that are going to direct you towards your goal. If you do the Saturnian bit, if you do the Saturnian part, I'm not going to say do the Neptunian bit, because that's a generational thing. And I think that speaks too much about the collective and about how that impacts your own consciousness. And they're invisible planets, the outer planets. So that's why I think of them that way. I'm much more traditional in that sense, in the way I look at this. But Saturn being dignified allows you to have that structure to move forward if you input the effort to think about it, to really try and organize with the facts that you have. And whatever deception you go through, if you have a difficult relationship with Neptune as well in your chart, whatever deceptions you go through are going to teach you the better way to do it. They're not just going to leave you hanging. They're not just going to leave you as, you know, the hang. It's much more of a hanged man situation than where you get clear of what you were doing that was stopping you from getting to where you wanted. And then clarity is given through that error. Than a death card situation in this case.
But if you do fall under that rule of fanatic of something or other,
your fanaticism is going to be thrown on your face.
Advice you said about take on those Saturnian qualities is exactly what the fanatic will be believing they are doing.
Yes, but then their fanaticism is going to be thrown on their face. You know, it's going to shine a light on their fanaticism and where the consequences. Saturn is consequences, is karma. So whatever you apply the Saturnian influence on, for instance, if you try to build a church and you're convinced that you're doing the right thing, but that church is telling everyone to kill people, or to kill homosexuals, for instance, or to be racist or anything like that, that's going to be highlighted. People are going to see that. People are going to see only that in your institution. even if you are able to take it all the way and build the freaking thing, the temple or whatever, people are going to look at it in that way. The Saturnian, let's avoid that space because it's full of fanatics. It's full of outcasts that are radical, despots and things like that. Authoritarianism and things like that.
Now, I'm want to go back to that point that you say that what's being decided now is going to affect the world long after the pair of us have gone, which you can say a lot of the times about various things anyway. But so
I say that specifically about the co-presence of Jupiter and Saturn is still in the same sign, in an air sign where they had the conjunction.
Okay. But let's bring it down a bit to while we're still going to be here, hopefully. New moon conjunct Mars. But the sun and Mars, it's not fully conjunct yet. So is this new moon, there's a few minutes, but new moon happens, then sun Mars happens. Okay, there's what? A couple of hours between it.
Yeah, it's almost immediately.
Is this new moon being the culmination of the previous Sun-Mars cycle, i.e. the Sun-Mars cycle of what we're in right now? Or does, as much as Mars is lending significance to this new moon, is the new moon lending significance to the next Sun-Mars cycle, or is it both?
It's both, because it's saying through the next Mars cycle, Sun-Mars cycle, we are going to have a lot of instability and change, because that's what the moon signifies. It signifies multiplicity and an incapability, because it's in detriment of reaching consensus, Libra, because too many ideas, too many cooks in the kitchen. And that's going to bring about the ruin. And that's also because we are going to have a full moon in a T-square with Pluto here. And that's going to bring about the ruin of many institutions that are corrupt, that have used their power in a way that nowadays, not judging if it's wrong or right, but that for nowadays is not working anymore. Whatever that is, whatever that means. I'm not saying it's going to be good. I'm not saying the capitalism is going to fall and all of these authoritarian figures are going to fall or anything like that. No, what I'm saying is we are going to have whatever institutions do not uphold these Saturnian values right now, whatever they look like in your society, they're going to fall. They're going to fall apart throughout the next 2 years. Now, with the next lunation cycle, it just means that's going to be a very unstable month.
So that's quite interesting what you were saying, because I think we mentioned it at the full moon, but I might have read the story afterwards, but about a lot of the oil companies of the world taking governments to court over the fact that they are going to lose profits because of the new climate.
And that's the beginning of the fall of that age, of all those companies, of the dominance of that market by those companies. If they don't change right now, if they don't do the Saturnian thing and start looking at the new things that they have neglected all these years that they need to focus on now to fix, for instance, environmental causes right now, if the company doesn't have those environmental issues on their minds, as they rebuild, as they rise from the pandemic state or anything like that, they're going to fall apart eventually. They're going to keep doing these lawsuit things. They're going to keep going against their governments to try and resurface as they were, but they're dead. They're a dead thing clinging on to existence, but that Saturn is already sweeping under its rug, to never rise again, to never see the sunlight again. Now, there's something else I wanted to say about Mars conjunct the sun. There is this feeling of this unsettling feeling that we are not going to reach consensus for a long time. And it's important that we have that, because it's important that we see where our previous consensus was not considering things that are important now.
Yeah.
So people, in other words, are not going to be able to spend as much water as they used to, because now they see the promises that were coming up all those decades ago, that we are going to have water shortages in the most, in the wettest places in the world, such as Brazil. We are having sandstorms in places where we have huge amounts of water. We used to have huge amounts of rivers and vegetation.
Yeah.
And it's just desert. It's becoming a desert now. It's in the process of becoming a desert because of human action. So we can no longer avoid those consequences. They are here and we are seeing them. And that has it's mandatory that it changes your view of how you function within life. Otherwise, you're just going to die or contribute to the fall of your own society.
Yeah, I want to draw now to the Sabian symbol, which is in the heat of the noon hour, a man takes a siesta. Now, some of the discourse on it, the interpretation of it, one of the phrases that I've noticed, I mean, the idea of in the heat of the noon hour, a man takes a siesta, says nothing about whether he's in the shade or in the sun. It says nothing about, is this something he should be paying attention to while he's having a nap? Or has he got the ability to safely have that nap? And I think that with that stifling of debate and the echo chambers, there's a lot of people taking naps.
Yes, because they feel uncomfortable. So the reaction of it, sorry, go on.
There's one other thing that it says that really I found really interesting and horrifying, being the pro-vax person. But a lot of the debates that are going around right now, the interpretation of this includes the phrase, limits on freedom must be monitored to sponsor occasional inner reorientation. Now, that follows with everything that you have been saying so far about the being forced to look inside and saying, are we doing this right? And half the time the answer being, not really.
You have to use the abundant air energy to come up with new ideals. That's what's being proposed right now, and that's what you should focus on. Not necessarily acting, but now in a bit, when Venus goes into Sagittarius, is going to require action. But do be mindful of everything that you're doing and make sure that you're acting on some ideal, not just on impulse, because impulse is not going to be rewarded right now. That's the Sun and Mars. That's the hot and dry nature. You have to use your more wet and cool and wet, or warm and wet Venus characteristics to try and deal with your actions, to try and take some actions, which means be cordial. Try to do Mars in a Venusian way. If you have to go to court, don't try and accuse the other person until the judge believes you, Just file your petition. Make sure you chose the right words. Make sure you have a good lawyer and all those things like that.
Yeah.
Just be prepared in the most correct way you can.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else that you want to conclude with about this moon? Because I think the message really on this has come through so strong, hasn't it?
Yeah, I do think that the last phrase
there's not really a lot else that we can
we covered a lot.
It's just
there's one more
patience.
Yeah, there's one more thing I just want to mention quickly, which is the cycle of eclipses coming to a head, and we are having Venus conjunct the South Node in Sagittarius.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to tell you in the house where Sagittarius falls, and I think that we could talk about, the different modalities here, how it's affecting everyone. I think that for cardinal signs, this is really a decisive moment. You are in the peak of it, you are in the thick of it, and you are trying to be the most authentic self, but you're the ones that are going to be feeling the most frustrated, even though you're also the ones with the most propelling energy available to you right now. It's going to be like every action doesn't feel as satisfactory because it feels like you have to keep acting. Be mindful of the pace that you're going at. Don't accelerate things in order to get earlier to a result. Just keep doing what you're doing and try and relax in the process. Try and use the time you have, the extra time you have, if you do, for creative purposes. And the fixed signs, they're going to be this to be feeling this energy of the moving forward the most, because you have Saturn and Jupiter stationing. And when I say fixed signs, cardinal signs, I'm mentioning the angles of your chart. That means the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th houses. So if you have these angles in fixed signs, you're going to be feeling this moving forward motion the most. Because Saturn and Jupiter are stationing and moving direct, you're also going to feel that a lot of things that you have had problems with in the past 6 months are going to be resolving themselves right now. Even if you don't take action to resolve them, you're going to see them resolving themselves, and you're going to see the path. Remember a couple of lunations ago, the fixed signs were the most frustrated. Now it's the turn of the cardinal signs to be frustrated and the fixed signs to be more of a, aha, this is the path I should follow. Because they have that energy of, Saturnian energy of doing things in a certain rhythm already. So now they just found the rhythm. It's like they found the right bandwidth to go with. Now you have the mutable signs, which have the eclipse energy coming up to their angles. So there are big decisions to be made here as well. But differently from the cardinal signs, which are going for a specific purpose, I feel like the mutable signs are still a bit unsure about which path to follow. It's like they have this multiplicity bit being too overwhelming for them. And I think that the best course of action is to follow your heart. This is going to feel a bit tacky, I think, if that's a good word to use, but
we're allowed.
yeah, it's a good thing right now to follow your instincts, because you're overthinking. You have this multiple ideas thing going on in your head, and you think all of them are good. But if you just actually stop and think, you will see a particular path opening up in front of you, even though you'll doubt it and it won't go as, exactly as you planned. You will feel that it's the right direction to go. So just sit down, try and quiet your mind, and do some meditation, and you're going to feel the right path to follow within the multiple ideas. So I think that's it.
Right. So play nice. Is make sure you got your facts straight. Make sure you're not being deceived. Make sure you're not deceiving yourself. And just be prepared that things will be unstable for a while.
Yes.
There you go. So how can people find you, David?
I have my website in the first place, astrologer.com. There you can find my services that are available, the hour that are available, the prices that are available. And we are going to have also the Instagram account. I'm going to have my YouTube account. I also have my Instagram account. They're all in the first place, so you can look for them through that name, and you'll find them.
All those details will be down in the description below. If you want to stop sharing for a moment, there's so if you want to contact either of us for a reading, like I say, just details down below. Don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're a new visitor to the channel, and welcome if you're a new visitor to the channel. I should have probably said that at the beginning, but hey ho, and we will see you in a couple of weeks for the next full moon. See you later, folks.